Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Hey, well, thank you, Sean. We are here back, No Dice, No Glory Studios, lockdown mode. I'm here with Mike Haught, somebody that hopefully you got to see last year when we had our roundtable for HMGS, and actually it was almost a year ago, Mike. So, Mike, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me back. Yeah, it's good. Good. It's been quite a year since then, eh?
Yeah, your accent has gotten more noticeable. Eh,
Yeah, I guess that's what 8 weeks of lockdown here in New Zealand will do to you. And we'll turn you more into a New Zealander than ever. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so. I- So for those of you that don't know, Mike has a really long resume as far as game design. We're going to talk about his brand new game, Dawn of Iron. But Mike, tell us a little bit about your background in wargaming.
yeah, so I've been playing miniature games for relatively few years. Well, I guess not anymore. Hey, um, got started in the genre around 2003 and was introduced to Flames of War, I think, pretty soon thereafter. And got into that game pretty full on at my hobby store in Moscow, Idaho, not to be confused with Moscow, Russia.
Yeah,
And was at the university town. Had a good group there going for Flames. We played lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of Flames of War. The other game we were playing at the same time, kind of in the background between Flames of War games, was Pirates of the Spanish Main. So that was that little collectible card game, assembly pirate game
I
back
know
back in
that
the
game.
old. Yeah, it's good. It was good fun. So that was kind of that was our filler game between Flames games, and so we would play that quite a bit. And then about 2007, I was just kind of wrapping up my master's degree stuff at university, and a message went up on the Flames of War website looking for web support and looking for someone to join the team. And I thought, what the heck, might as well give it a try. And I applied, and I got the interview, which was really kind of amazing. And I got on the phone with the guy who was heading up the studio at the time, and it turns out he was from Nebraska, and he was a colonel in the cavalry. And it just so happened that I did my resume piece, if you will, a demonstration on the 91st Cavalry, which was part of his the heritage of his unit. So it just we hit it off like straight away, and so he hired me, brought me down to I'm about to say Australia, yikes,
Ooh,
brought me down to New Zealand, 2007, and I started work as a web support guy for the first 3 hours of my time at Battlefront, and then about about lunchtime, Phil came over and said, "Hey, would you like to write a book?" And I said,
Phil
"Well, yeah,
Yates,
but I've
ladies and gentlemen. Phil
yeah,
Yates.
Phil Yates, yeah, creator of Flames of War." And I said, "Well, yeah, but I've only been here like literally for 3 hours." And so he said, "Doesn't matter. We need someone to jump on this Soviet book for 'cause they were just getting started with Soviet late war at the time. So it was the Onslaught at Orsha was the book that I started." And yeah, so I'd only been there for 3 hours, and I already had a job title and change, and I got into writing books for them. So that was 2007, and then did a lot of writing for them, a lot of different tasks. Did some web stuff at the time, but I really got hooked on doing kind of campaigny stuff or um, kind of gaming in the gaps. You had the big five, the big um, uh, nations in the game, and I like to play the smaller nations, or I like to play the aspects of those nations that were less known. And so that was kind of how I kind of got started on trying to find interesting ways or interesting spots in history that haven't really been um, very prevalent in the foreminds of people who play games. So I realized that there's a lot of people who played Flames of War, but not a lot of people who knew, like, for example, Finland's part of it or Hungary's part of it. They do now, and that's in large
Yeah.
part thanks to Phil and Wayne's dedication back in the early days to get people across those early nations. So yeah, so I
Take a
did that for
take a victory lap. It was also due to
yeah,
you.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And it's been really good. It's been yeah, so that was up to 2015. Then I jumped into computer games after that. Got into computer game design stuff like that, but I've never left the miniature game design world. Kept and I still keep in touch with Phil and Wayne and guys, and we get together quite often, or as often as we can nowadays. Um, Play games, design games in our back of our minds. And this Ironclads game has been kind of sitting in the back of my head for many, many decades. So I'm very excited to finally bring it to life.
Yeah, so we're gonna fast forward to the starting of Scary Biscuit Studio. This is the first title from Scary Biscuit, correct?
Yeah, so I started off with I think I started I started the podcast, the blog in about 2010 as kind of a hobby blog, and all of us at Battlefront did that, and we all had our own uh, kind of our like what we were up to sort of thing, and we kind of
Yeah.
kept each other motivated as we went through. Um, and then yeah, then I've kind of transitioned when I left Battlefront. I realized that I still had a gap where I wanted to do this. I wanted to keep doing. I wanted to keep making games, and so I thought, well, I've got this platform. I'm just going to reuse that and just kind of lean into that a little bit. And since then, we've been working on doing what do we do? So we got this Ironclads thing, but just before that, I started working on a Dreadnought version of it. And then so there was like a Dreadnought game that I was working on, and that kind of morphed into Ironclads. But yeah, this will be the first like published title, first thing that I put up. I have a couple more kind of lined up. I'm just seeing how this goes and how much time and effort I can dedicate to those other projects. But yeah, this one's been quite exciting as our first I say hour. It's really just my um, first kind of title,
Foray.
I guess. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I caught you. Well, I think I did know who you were before, but I saw that you put a teaser up, and I was like, wow, this game is pretty cool. So we're gonna get into the game in a second, but why? So I know we talked before. I know you like the naval games. What about Civil War Ironclad, Civil War naval combat that you think is the most exciting, and why do you like gaming it?
Yeah, it's a great question. The interesting thing about Ironclads is just that it sits at a crossroads in history, and as I was saying earlier, I really like to find those crossroads that people they may know something about. They might know, oh, suddenly there's these iron ships floating around beating the crap out of these timber ships. Um, they might know that much, but what actually goes on and actually like why why did the crews do the things they did? Why were they not more prolific right at the start? Why didn't they do it earlier? Those kind of things. I want to tease out some of those questions through the game, and those are the questions that are kind of going through my mind when I'm looking at Ironclads. And I remember when I was, oh boy, I must have been a very small boy at the time, when Dad uh, clicked on the Ironclads movie. It's like I don't know, from TNT or something like that. I want to say one of Ted Turner's classics. An old movie about ironclads, and I just remember watching those scenes, those battle scenes, and thinking, this is a different kind of war from what you're expecting. Like when you're in like a metal box and you think you're invincible, you might appear like that outside, but hear all the clanging and all the smoke and the steam and all this kind of stuff that's happening inside the ships and stuff like that. There's just so much drama happening inside. Um, and yet the overall view from outside is that these ships are invincible. They're just slicing through other ships and all stuff. And like the ordeal that these guys are going through inside the ship, it's very much the opposite of that. And so I just found that really interesting. And I found that what that those stories that I used to read as a child, reading like the battles and leaders of the Civil War, those naval stories. Whenever we got to one of those, that there would be really interesting drama about what was going on inside, those seemingly invincible ships. And I realized that there was some interesting aspect for wargaming there, because a lot of war games you see these ironclads show up and they kind of wreck everything. It's like, well, that might be true initially, but there's a toll that could be kind of brought out a little bit more obviously in the game that and that so I kind of seek to do that. So for me, war games are a great opportunity to learn about something new, or if it is something you know about it already, it's an opportunity for you to dig really deep into it. And I think that that with Ironclads, that was the second instance.
Yeah, and the game is pretty deep, and we're gonna go in detail in a minute. So usually, why how do folks end up designing games? The first one is that there's no other games out there that cover that aspect of history. That's one. But in this case, there's a lot of Ironclad games out there. I think this one kind of is. It's the first one I ever got hooked into just from reading the rules. I think it's really good. But what about those games that just didn't do it for you, where you're like, I kind of have fresh idea, fresh look here, and I'm going to design my own game.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, it was about that story, about the story of the sailors that are on that ship, the getting banged around, firing off rounds, having stuff happening on your ship. The damage control side of it was kind of the where I wanted to be at. There are some games that do lean into that, but they start getting quite nitty gritty. They're starting to you've got your checkboxes, or you've got your um, individual little charts, like lots of charts that kind of tell what happens when iron hits iron. Um, it got to the point where it was more about those technical details than the stories of the sailors themselves, which is kind of where I wanted to kind of expand that a little bit more. On the other side, a lot of the Civil War games that I encountered were quite high level. So you would get whole kind of like squadron level, like even or above kind of games where you're managing 6 to 10 ships, and that's a small game. Or you're moving them on hexes, and you're trying to plot all of your sailing points and all this kind of stuff. So then that was more of a game about sailing and maneuvering, which is again fantastic for people who really wanted to focus on the maneuvering element. And but yeah, again, it kind of got away from the story of the sailors, which is kind of where I wanted to kind of dive into. That was kind of the level and the space that I thought was kind of missing in a lot of games.
You bring up such an interesting point. We call those guys that you mentioned before rivet heads. They're all about the technology, and the technology was awesome. But I think you said it brilliantly. It doesn't tell the whole story of what went on back then, and it doesn't put a face on it. Um, let's look at naval wargame in general. It's a big blue sheet with tiny little ships. There's not a lot going on. So, what makes it interesting? And I think folks in the past, and not going to mention any other games, have gone down the extreme detail version of the game. And I just think it gives it that very cold mechanical feeling of what these ships were. But if you go back to the 1861, 1862, when these ships first came out, I mean, these are small, tight knit crews they were in it together, and if something went bad, they all died together. So
Yeah.
one of the things about this game that I like is the focus on the crew working with the technology. I, while I was reading this game, and because of Mike, I went out and bought a bunch of 1600 class Ironclad. Well, not a bunch, but four for me and they're really easy to paint. It's just everybody disagrees on what color they didn't have color coders back then. But
Yeah,
you know,
what color of metal you're supposed to have?
yeah, like, oh no, it was black. I'm like, well, mine's gonna be this color. Um, but kind of going through and playing the game a few times, and that was a while ago. I haven't I haven't done it since. I kind of like the feel of it. Now, one of the things I think our Flames of War crowd will notice is that the ship cards look really familiar as far as layout, which I
Yep.
like.
Yep.
It has that Flames at War type feeling. I know Phil Yates. Didn't he? Did he help you with this?
Yeah, he and I worked closely. Like I put together the rules, and I've been kind of hammering on them for quite some time. So he knew kind of my mission statement. And so when I finally got the rule book kind of in a ready state, I flicked it through to him and to get his feedback. And yeah, and then he had a good as Phil does. He's got a nice big pile of red pen comments, which is great. I love seeing red pen. It scares some people. Some people it sends to the hills, but for me, I embrace it. I live off of that kind of stuff. So got incorporated helped incorporate his notes. So you'll see a good influence from that point of view. Yeah.
Yeah. So besides your ships and your blue mat, um, you have these ship cards that give you all the data. And when you look at orders and damage, you took a different tack than some other games. You are using a card mechanic that gives critical damage, gives cumulative damage, gives different degrees of damage. So it kind of, as you're fighting, it tells a story of what is going on in the ship. And you also use cards for orders, which I've seen in other games, and I do kind of like them. I'm going to go back to Sales of Glory for that one. That was probably the coolest thing about that system. Um, but the charts are also based on cards. It's easy to look at. Um, it's easy to find out what is going on. One thing I noticed: these ships take so much damage.
Yep.
And you're not going to sink and destroy one. I never did. When I was looking at two Ironclads fighting against one another, it's hard to kill the thing outright. But the way the cards work, it gets to a point where these ships are kind of unmanageable at this point, and you flee the field. What was the driving motivation behind using a card system, a card pull system for damage, um,
Yeah.
especially?
The card stuff I of course stole unashamedly from a lot of other games that use it.
X-wing.
So
Yeah,
X-Wing
there you
was
go.
is yeah,
Armada.
or Armada, or even Wings of War and Sales of Glory for the Orders. That was one idea from there. But the I one of the philosophies that I've got with my games when I'm making them is I want you to be able to read the state of the table and know what the state of the game is. And so one of the things that kind of came through from my Flames background was no assumed knowledge. Don't assume anything. And that to me meant um, no charts, no big tables and things like that that you had to kind of map out. And I do have one chart. I did afford myself one in the game, but it fits on a card. So so the whole concept behind the damage and kind of have that gradient kind of came again right from those stories. Kind of looking at like the one that stuck in my head was I think it was uh it might have been Plum Point Creek or Bend. Sorry, Plum Point Bend, just ahead of the Battle of Memphis on the Mississippi River. And there's a really good account in there of a couple of Confederate rams ramming into two city class ironclads that were just kind of moored on the side of the river. They weren't really kind of ready for them. They didn't have their steam up or anything like that. And and ironclads caught them. Sorry, the rams caught them unawares and just slammed into them, sunk two. And the stories that kind of came out of those sailors inside those city class ironclads as they were getting rammed were incredibly dramatic for you get this vision in your head of the Civil War being if it's not black and white people standing still photos, it's you get that, you still get that kind of I don't know, rigid kind of Victorian feel from that period. And what really struck me reading these accounts was they were so human, and like it was just so terrifying to be, where the iron sides of your ship cease being an advantage, and it becomes a prison. You can't get out because there's no way to get through. There's no, all the ports are all closed up, or all this stuff. And it's just like it was just such a terrifying moment where they realized in order to save the ship, they had to take it to to the other side of the river. Um, and then let it sink on the other side of the river so they could retrieve it later. Like there's all these decisions that's kind of going through their heads, like how do we how do we manage this stuff? And again, it's that damage control drama adds to what that adds to the ship. And then what kind of came out of those stories I quite noticed was like there's like a multi-layer aspect to the damage. There could have been more layers. I've got two in the game. I've got cumulative damage and critical damage, but there probably could have been more. But I wanted to kind of keep it simple. The idea was is cumulative damage is all repairable stuff that you can send your crew out to try and repair. The critical damage is stuff that is like no, you'll need to turn into port to fix that. So if you let things kind of get out of hand, stuff will eventually cumulative damage will eventually sink you. But the critical damage will shut parts of your ship down. And that was the other aspect I pulled from Star Wars Armada was I liked the idea of like the quadrants and parts of your ship acting independently from each other. As a whole, they move and they can maneuver and stuff like that. But like firing out this side of the ship, firing out that side of the ship, that can be impacted by various parts of the game. And so I wanted that kind of in the game as well. So a lot of those damage cards they'll kind of choose specific pieces of the ship. So the damage card, sorry, the ship card has a bunch of stats on it. For shooting, for maneuvering, for your draft, for your acceleration, but a lot of those there are kind of there to serve the damage control deck. It's stuff for the damage control deck to damage. But it's still, I mean, it helps make the ship realistic as well. But I just wanted to bring out like all these systems that your ship has. They're all kind of under threat when things start going haywire, and so the damage is meant to kind of play off of all of those different levers and different points in the game, and then hopefully those damages you take them, they can kind of tell a story as well. There's a couple of them in there that one of them was Phil's idea, which I really loved. Was there's a damage card in there thing called Things Are Getting Worse, and it does nothing on its own, but it just randomly selects an existing damage card that's already on the ship or the next one that comes if it's the only one, and it doubles the effect of that one. Like it's like remember that flooding we had a minute ago? Well,
It's
now it's
worse.
even worse. Yeah.
My shoes are wet.
um, yeah, exactly. And so that's really cool. And then likewise in the critical damage deck, there's one called the secondary explosion, and the little fluff text in there is like, what was that? And that one causes some hull damage to you, but then immediately you play another cumulative damage to it. So like there's like a secondary explosion happens somewhere else on the ship, and now suddenly it's worth two. It's kind of like 1.5 cards. So there's some really cool stuff that then I got a lot of these ideas from the community, which is what I really loved about the
Yeah.
working with them and getting their kind of input on what kind of stuff goes wrong on ships and stuff like that, and especially sailing ships. So and steamships. Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
is something that you manage very well. So I've worked on other games, and I keep telling folks, don't crowdsource a lot of stuff. A lot of gamers have really good ideas, but more of them have a lot of really good bad ideas that could bog down a game. But as this game developed, they noticed that first of all, you had an amazing support crew there. Some of these guys I know and I've played against that gave you, in my opinion, amazing ideas on how to pull this game off. One of the things I was going to say, and this is from my brief play test, actually wasn't, I think it was a couple of months ago, was that you're maneuvering and you're looking to get your shots, and depending on what kind of ironclad you have or what kind of ship you have different decisions to make. Once you start taking on damage, it's like a whole new game. I have to now think about maneuvering, think about firing if I still can, as well as how am I going to deal with all this damage. And I really like that. There was I'm not going to say busy because gamers hate that, but there's a lot of decisions you have to make every single turn in this game, which I felt was something fresh in naval gaming. What did your playtesters say? Or, first of all, where did that whole thing spring out from? And was that something that your playtesters really enjoyed about the game?
yeah, that's a great point. Like one of the things that I think I mentioned earlier, this game started off in kind of like the Dreadnought era, so kind of World War I ships, and I kind of had this mechanic in there, and The feedback came back very different. It was like, I've got this massive dreadnought. I've just taken, like not small arms fire. Eight, if any, 8 inches is small arms fire, but that's
For
the idea.
Dreadnought, yeah.
Yeah, for dreadnought certainly is. And now I've got to deal with this crazy thing that's happening, and at the time I didn't have the divided cumulative and critical damage, so I kind of took that on board as well. But a lot of these kind of ideas did kind of come from the community. It was not as much, um, uh, I guess, valued as in the dreadnought space as it was when I started kind of putting it into Ironclads, and I found that really curious. And so I leaned into it a little bit, and I was asking people around, like, is this too much? Are we asking too much for players to do? And one of the bits of feedback that came back was like, no, because you can only make one decision in your turn. I mean, you can only really do one thing. So you may have a lot of stuff that you can do. It's about prioritizing, and so you're not having to do a bunch of stuff in your turn. All of it. You don't have to do all the things. In fact, you can't do all the things. You have to decide: am I going to let that flooding go, or am I going to try to put out the fire on the other end of the ship? And you've got one dice to throw, but there might be some ways to, or some, like an order that might give you an extra chance at getting to both of those things. But the orders come in such a way that the larger your ship, the slower those orders take to percolate through the crew. So if you've got like the new Ironsides, which is a gigantic iron
Huge.
casemate frigate, that's gonna, you send an order down to the engine room. That might take a little bit longer than it'll say like on the monitor, which is a little bit, quite a bit smaller. So the idea with that is, if you can kind of figure out what your priorities are going to be in future turns. Again, I stole this directly from Star Wars Armada. I really liked their order system. That if you can kind of think, okay, I'm going to be in the heat of battle in about 3 turns. I think I'm going to want to station some guys on damage control. So by turn 4, I've got this extra damage control like ready in case I need it. I may not need it. That's fine. But it kind of it gives you that ability to kind of think ahead and to kind of guess where you're going to need these extra crew. So if I were to go back and look at Dreadnought, I'd still probably try to bring that back again now with cumulative and critical damage, and but also I would probably tweak the orders a little bit to help make that not particularly cumbersome. But the idea of being able to have a lot of options, a lot of choices, and it's almost as much about the choices you don't make in a turn as it does the choices you do make. And if you only have a few ships, because that's the other thing, the other side of it is I have seen some playtesters, and I've done this. I've tried to do this myself. I try to run large fleets, and the game does kind of cap out at about 5 ships.
Per
And
side.
because yeah, per side, and because of 5 ships I've found, and other people have done this and they've not complained. So maybe I'm just not able to handle it much, but um, I tried to run a Charleston battle where you had like almost 10 ships on each side, a bunch of gunships and a couple of ironclads on the Confederate side, and a ton of ironclads and a couple of wooden ships on the Union side, and forts, a bunch of forts in there, Fort Sumter being one. And so there's all this stuff. Um, and I noticed my opponent and I we were kind of flagging, and we were just getting into the action in terms of being able to get close range shots with our 15-inch guns and stuff. So it was quite, there was just there was definitely a kind of like an upper limit to the amount of tracking you have to do with all of the different things. You got damage coming through, you've got shooting you've got to do, that kind of stuff. But
We have a term for that, by the way.
yeah.
It's called helmet fire,
Ah,
where too many things are coming in. And actually, when they design aircraft, um, that is something they look at. If we're giving too much stimulus to the air crew, and they can't prioritize because
yeah.
stuff's getting jammed in. But sorry, go right ahead.
No, that's it. That's it exactly. And so I think that the game sits best at that 3 to 5 ship range, and even like a single ship. You can get so much action out of a single ship too. Um, and and that's kind of like that seems to be about the sweet spot. And the testing seems to kind of bear that out. Like I was saying, there were a few people who tried to do whole battles of things. um, and that it does work. It's just I think you do need to kind of maybe think about not doing some stuff that the rules say that you need to do, and so you might need to make your own adjustments. I guess is what I'm trying to say for larger scale battles. But then for me, what that starts to push that boundary of what the game was about. The game was about the stories of the sailors, and when you start getting into squadron level stuff, that's a lot of sailors. That's a lot of stories. So for me, it's that the cognitive load is about 3 to 5 ships.
But it's also where you didn't want to go with the game. One of the things I like about the game, especially I've only done 2 ships, is that it's a war game. That's why you create it. But it's also a game that kind of gives you a taste of what goes into being a captain of a ship and all the things that get presented to you rather quickly. That how do you prioritize and then still win the game? There's almost an excitement as you play, as you go through your decision tree. What am I going to do next? Am I going to break off engagement and try to fix my ship, which actually happened in the first fight of the Ironclads. I think the Virginia broke off, did some repairs, came back. Um, there were a lot of interesting things that a game could do. I think this one really shows command and control of a ship, because you could play with 5 ships, but you really don't have rules that extend beyond the scope of the single ship. You're still essentially playing 5 ships independently, just that you're making decisions for all 5. It's the only thing that it has. So I really like that. And the game has, if you just explain, and I know people are listening going, man, this is another Rivet guy. It's not. It's done so slickly. And with the cards, especially if you don't, you're going to have people that probably are going to get this game and throw up 80 ships. God bless them. And
Yep.
they'll probably play it with one dude or dudette on the other side of the table. And God bless them. It's just the game just wasn't created for that. What it does, I think, when you look at the aspect of what it's like to command a single ship in naval, I think it hits a home run. That's why I was very excited when you said it's final, and that's big reason why you're here. I like you too. Um, long time fan.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think folks will really kind of dig that. And not to get you nervous, I talked about this game. Um, I was one of the mentors for the wargaming class at the Naval Academy. And one of the things I spoke to them about was my working on a bunch of Dreadnought period games. And somebody asked me about Civil War. And I said, there's a bunch of games out there, but there's one that I'm excited for. And when it's finally out, I'm going to bring it to Annapolis, the U.S. Naval Academy, and play it because I think they would find it interesting because we're kind of training them to be ship captains maybe one day. Not all of them; some of them will fly.
Hmm.
But looking at the learning curve of what you need to know for any game, let alone how to command a ship. The game does it in a slick manner where I think I could take these college students through and see what they think. And I'm excited to do that. Uh, hopefully, you
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. Like the one of the things that kind of came from the Battlefront side of things as well, um, around Flames of War is Phil and crew were really good at giving you a bunch of levers to pull, and
right.
you don't have to pull all of them. And it becomes more of a game of exploration. So with this game, I've kind of done hopefully something similar where you don't have to dig into you can dig in as deep as you want. There might be a bottom that you might discover, but the idea is that you don't have to you engage the game at the level that you want to engage. If you just want it to be a fun quick whip through kind of play style game, that's perfectly fine. If you want to start digging into the actual if you want to get digging into like the tactics, the damage control stuff we were just talking about, the order stuff. I wanted to provide enough stuff there behind the scenes to let you to let you do that to some extent. So as to be as inclusive as possible, but to not be exclusive. So in a way, like don't want it to be super complicated for people just getting into the period. So the rule book that's why the rule book is 15 pages long. It's not any longer. And it's a big chunk of like missions and scenarios and stuff like that attached to to make up the other 15 pages. But the actual core rules are 15 pages, and that's for a reason. That's meant to be make it accessible and to be able to quickly see how to do these things. But there's still a lot of choices wrapped up in each one of those points that you can kind of discover as you go. A lot of combinations, a lot of ways worked together are all in that. They're all in there. They're just yeah, they're there for you to discover.
Yeah, one of the things I dig, and I think people will like it too, is um, it's a points-based game. So each ship has a certain point level that this is how much you build a fleet, and okay, you do 150 points, 200 points. You don't have to play narrative game, which is a beauty of Flames of War, where you're playing with forces from the period that were maybe flavored for Italy or Russia in 1942, but you're not playing a narrative game. You're not redoing Stalingrad, like Stalingrad. So you start off where you and your opponent look at a point total, and then you can upgrade your card. You have upgrade cards where I could put different weapons on it. I could put famous commanders on it. I think you have two right now, Warden and Buchanan. You could throw Marines on your ship. You could upgrade your crew. I think that's something that I like within a game that I think is pretty cool because it's one of the how do you keep somebody's head in a game when they're not playing it? Well, Flames of War does that brilliantly, right? Because if I'm not playing the game, I'm tinkering on lists. I'm tinkering at all times, and what does that end up doing? It gets me thinking about the game. It also gets me spending more. I need to buy that. Need to buy this. The same thing too in this game. Even though you're only playing with a bunch of ships, so like looking at the points of some of the ships you have in the game. I don't have a new USS New Ironsides, but I want to get it because of the capabilities the ship has. And then, well, I probably want to. Look, you can play blue on blue in this game, but then how many points is that going to be then worth for a Confederate fleet? And I think that is just something interesting. I think gamers will like because they can put their own little I really want a veteran crew here because I played this game before and I'm a little worried about damage control. So I think the game does that very, very well. I think folks are going to get really excited about that. Um, it's one of the things that with new games. Well, are you showing me the same old stuff? Now I know you said too. I stole that. James Dunnigan said, "There's no such thing as stealing within war games. You're adopting and improving, and you threw things that are just not in any other Civil War Ironclad game. It's just not there. This is a new, fresh game. That's why I'm all excited about it. I just have to figure a way to make the card, print out all these cards. I'm not really good with paper and scissors. It's not my
Yeah,
thing.
that's the that was a that was a hard choice. So being in New Zealand, it's a little bit hard to line up logistics. I would have otherwise have thought print on demand, which I'm still pursuing at the moment, and I I should have thought about this at the start. This was a good learning for me. Was the print on demand is obviously super popular. They've got their queues are really backed up now because everyone is in lockdown, and I think, hey, let's do some print on demand. So I think their printing presses are working full time, but
Yeah,
the but they've got like a special template that they work to, and I didn't think about it when I first did it to set up the game and the books to these templates. And the other aspect that I hadn't encountered or hadn't anticipated was the difference between A4 and US letter paper size. So when I was putting together these cards, I intentionally made them the same size as like a magic card, and so that you could use those sleeves, and you wouldn't have to. You could just cut them out, throw them in a sleeve, and they look nice. Um, and I hadn't. considered the aspect ratio changing when you print them on letters. People were coming back with feedback saying these are the weirdest size cards I've ever seen. They get all squishy, and I realized that they were printing them on U.S. letter, and I was like, of course, that makes so much sense. So I've had to do a couple of different versions of it. So if you do get the rolls, there's like an A4 version and a US letter one. So use the right one there. But then I thought actually this makes print on demand really this is a good case for print on demand because then you just get a one size fits all situation. So I'll get the everything kind of into a book, so all the rules and things into a book, the history and stuff, and then there's print on demand services that do cards as well. So that's my next trench of work is to get the game ready for print on demand.
I'm trying to get some of the markers put on stickers.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I'm already looking to see who can print that. So if anybody out there wants to hook us up, um, I'll be at Historicon. Come to this.
Yeah.
This will come out next Tuesday, which people listening go, wait, I'm already listening. So that was not it was for Mike. Um, what was one of the most interesting things as you were playtesting and getting feedback that you got that gave you a moment like, huh, this is not that, I need to change this, or I think I'm onto something here.
Yeah. I had a playtest game against my son. He was at the time 8. And he was getting into it. He loved it. But what I noticed pretty early on was my ranges were all messed up. He had figured out a strategy of sailing a wide circle around my Union monitors. So he had Virginia and was using the Brooks rifles on there to just pick at me at long range. And I noticed that I was like, why is he doing this? This doesn't make any sense because the gun is heavy. I mean, so the gun was medium, and at long range, it was going to be quite impossible for them to do any damage to my monitor. The monitor had like 6 inches of iron, so it's not like it's gonna go through or anything like that. But I asked him, I said, so what's this? And he's like, well, I've got really long range, so I might as well be shooting at you. And I was like, oh, okay, I see. And so it was
I
not
never
that
want
it
to
was
play
gonna
that kid.
yeah, exactly. It's not it's but what I wanted to avoid, what kind of really teased out for me was I wanted to make sure that when you roll a dice, it should mean something. One of the things that I found really frustrating with like playing, and this actually came from Flames of War, when you've got lots and lots of tanks, a lot of tanks that have machine guns that have kind of like a mild anti-tank capability, and you've got like a paper enemy tiger in front of you. Um, there's a or sorry, like a little paper tank of some kind with like armor 0 or something like that. You get you get the temptation then to roll all of those machine gun dice on the hope that one of them is going to pierce that paper thin armor. So you end up then having to resolve like 15 anti-tank 2 shots or something like that, where you create like this massive amount of work just for like the outside chance that you're going to penetrate that armor 0. So that was one instance that I was like, okay, I really need to I want to make sure that with this game that some of that is kind of abstracted out. Like it doesn't mean that like every single ship is going to have a go at it. So that's why like a 12-pounder uh, boat howitzer is rated very light in my game, and that and has very short range compared to the longer Brooks rifles and stuff like that. Um, so one of the things that I wanted to make sure was that you're not going to be just trying to fire boat howitzers at each other. That the whole idea and the purpose of a boat howitzer was to repel boarding party, or to be able to shoot at like troops on land. So I wanted to make sure that those light ones kind of didn't have a chance to go through armor in a way. So before I used to have the ability to for very light weapons to eventually crack into and cause damage to ships. I decided to abstract that out. So yeah, that was a that was a bit of a learning curve, all thanks to my 8-year-old at the time.
So we're going to see yet another game. Is that what you're trying
Yes.
to say? And I
Yeah, I
don't
think
want to
so.
play against him. He's really good. He's the kind of guy that will take like Matilda's Swarm,
Yep.
um, or Churchill's Swarm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know you love him, but yeah, I don't want to play him. which is good. I mean, and that's one of the playtesting. Playtesting is probably one of the most important things that you can do with a game. And somebody goes, well, I play tested I send it out to play testers, and I go, how many hundreds of play tests did you? Oh, I think we did 15. I go, yeah, you're about 85 short of what I consider the minimum. A lot of it is you want people to try to break the game, and the whole story with your son gives an interesting thing. He doesn't know anything about class. I mean, maybe he does, and he doesn't have years of naval tactics and playing naval games. But he
Yep.
very quickly figured out how to kind of beat the game, and he probably was your key playtest because he found something that didn't work out so well. So that's awesome. You got to keep
Yeah.
them. You got to keep them around.
All right. Yeah, I suppose we will. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you don't stop feeding him.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. So yeah, I'm excited for this game. I just want to get it to print and get folks out there, and take it to a store, and hopefully it will. Unfortunately, I can't take it to Historicon because I'm so busy there, because we're actually having tournaments again here in the United States, and I'm not saying
Nice.
that to gloat. Yeah,
Yeah. That's
it's
good.
yeah. Well, I just got my third shot, so I'll probably die of like tetanus or something. Who knows? Um,
Or you get your
but
6G.
yeah, I got my 6G.
Yeah.
But I think the points aspect of the game means, folks, this game can be done in a tournament setting. We know folks like that, but you can also recreate those narrative battles. But the points also show you maybe how far out of whack some of those narrative games that you may want to play over. Because when you start totaling up Union versus Confederate, you realize it's a 100-point swing. That's pretty big in this game. Um, so you may not make kind of may not want to do that. Let's quickly talk about the ships that you picked for the game. Not all of them are iron.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah. So one of the things I kind of encountered early on was so this again, this started off as a side project after the Dreadnought game, and quickly became much bigger and more widespread in my mind than the Dreadnought game, just because of that variety and different types of ships. They just didn't know what they were doing when they hit this point and they started seeing like HMS Warrior and stuff like that overseas. They thought, okay, well, there's a traditional looking ship that is now iron. Okay, I guess that makes sense. That's the story of New Ironsides as well. Like let's make our own, just like that. Um, but what I really like about the American Civil War in particular, um, is just how weird and wonderful their ships were. Because on the day that Lincoln declared the blockade, um, they didn't have very many ships. Like there was like the Navy was very small at the time. Only a few frigates, most only a couple of steam frigates, and
they
most of them were
laughed
all
at him when he said it.
yeah, exactly. It's like what are you trying to do here? But nevertheless, the intent was there, so the Navy followed suit. And what I loved about the story on both sides is this mad scramble to create whatever kind of ships they could possibly do to meet the demands of their particular president. So, like on the southern side, they needed ships that could break through this blockade, or at the very beginning, to be able to uh, run past them at night, or just so it's like all engine and no and like the compartments are tiny, you know. And so like when if it did return, like the return on investment would have been questionable. But the variety of ships that came through, and most of them converted civilian steamers, all sorts of different things. You got the weird CSS Manassas down in Louisiana, which I think was an icebreaker. And I'm like, what's an icebreaker doing in New Orleans? You know, pardon me. Um,
You still there?
yep. Sorry, I've got a dog that's deciding to bark at something next
Oh,
door.
I was waiting for my hound to held.
um, yeah. So what's an icebreaker doing in New Orleans to be converted into the very very first. And that's another aspect of it. That was actually the first Ironclad was the CSS Manassas down, which was actually started life as a privateer. It was a privately built Ironclad, and had one gun that could kind of poke out the front. It would shoot, and then the idea was that it would then ram whatever it had just shot at. So it's running around down there. You've got side wheel paddle steamships cruising the coasts. You've got full river boats, like the casino type, the Mark Twain type, going up and down the Mississippi that have been converted. They've got big piles of cotton bales kind of stacked up on deck to help make them bulletproof. You needed it was like a 2.5 yards of cotton to make it reasonably bulletproof from your 50 caliber mini balls. There's just such innovation and such and the innovation that matched the panic that of those early years, and that didn't actually really go away. I mean, eventually the Union starts launching classes of ships, like classes of monitors, maybe in 1862, 1863. But those first months of the war, there's just a lot of strange looking ships, and I think that's what pulled me in. I think that's what more than anything, those strange ships. Because at the time I was scratch building all this stuff. I have my little balsa fleet, and I was
Oh
looking for
yeah.
interesting things to do. And what I didn't want to do was square rig ships. I did a USS Minnesota for my kind of Hampton Roads kind of set, and then I stopped there. I was like, okay, I'm not doing another. I'm not doing square rig or any type of rigged ships that maybe if I do, it'd be very few and far between. And so getting pulled into all these interesting steamships that the architecture is just all over the place made that really interesting. So there's all sorts of cool stuff in the American Civil War that I was not ready for. I was expecting it to be kind of, I think, well, like a lot of people, that vision of just having a blockade and that being it. Maybe the occasional river battle, but really, at the end of the day, it was incredibly unique. Tons of different types of ships, and I think that's that to me. That's when I realized that we actually had plenty of variety to make this a full-fledged game. There's just so many different things that you can kind of explore. You can in all sorts of different battlefields. Like a riverine battlefield is completely different than a coastal battlefield, which is completely different than open sea. So you got that interesting mechanic as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Which is interesting because when I first downloaded it, I was like, "Where are the ship cards?" I found them. I was just able to download them now because I knew that you put a lot of ships in there, and I'm like, "What?" But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really neat game, and I told you 40 minutes, so it's been a little longer, so you can shoot me. But
Yeah.
there's a
What do you
couple,
got there?
just like the last time, just like the last. So let's talk about next steps, and let's, what is the next big project that you're looking at?
Yeah, so the next big trench work for me is I want to double down on what I've got and get that into. I think I mentioned earlier. I think the next trench work is getting the print on demand stuff all done up. But in order to make that kind of worth it, I think for both customers and myself is I want there to be more content to it than what is currently in there. So right now there's a 24-page rulebook. I've just added last night. I added kind of a Battle of Hampton Roads battle pack, which has a couple of extra missions, scenarios, and about 20 more ship cards. That was the other thing. Like I just had no idea that there were 20 ships at the Battle of Hampton Roads. I mean,
I
everyone,
didn't know either.
yeah, everyone thinks it's just the two or the three, and there's actually quite a few more that tried to make it in, but a lot of them had the same fate as Minnesota and ran aground, had to turn around. So ton of them, and then also a bunch of gunships. The gunship war is a whole other aspect that I'm finding really fascinating. Um, but the next kind of trench of work is to get some of extra content, get more content in together, and then to make it worth printing a book around. And so that to me means getting Hampton Roads kind of in there. The other one I want to do is Battle of Memphis. That was the big Ram-O-Rama that happened up in Memphis on 6th of June, 1862, where those rams that had just sunk those two ships I talked about kind of early in the podcast, they all in turn got sunk when the ironclads were ready for them this time, and actually just tore them to ribbons. So there was so I kind of want to cover that on the riverine side of it, and I also want to kind of cover off the other aspect of the Civil War that a lot of people are familiar with is the Raider War. So I wanted to kind of set up a little scenario with the Alabama and the Corsage. I think that'd be kind of a cool little one-on-one duel kind of thing. So those three things kind of cover all of the main types of battles in the Civil War, and then we can go deeper into all the different battles. There's so many of them: Charleston, Port Royal, a whole bunch of others along the coast, and there's a bunch up and down the coast, or up and down the Mississippi, Vicksburg, and the Red River campaign. And they're all closely linked to those riverine boats. So there's so much more to sink into. From there, I'm I'm tempted to look at, because I've had a few people ask me already for European ironclads, and
Of course,
specifically you're looking at the Greek, so the Greeks and the um,
Turks.
Turks, yes, yeah, they had a big battle of Lissa, and so there's that that's on my radar. And looking into that, there's a ton of interesting ships in that space. But really, my mind wants to get back to World War One. It's always kind of started there. I do want to get back to that point. What I might do is I might take it like a little detour into kind of like that the end of the Victorian era, kind of since I kind of started. I've got the start of the Victorian era naval stuff. I kind of want to end it with that as well, and looking at the pre-dreads as kind of a as a new era, kind of again doing the same thing I've done with Civil War, but for Spanish American War. I think that's kind of a space, a gaming space that is not as well known, and I think there's some really cool and interesting naval engagements. And again, now I'm putting it on record. I think that would be a side project, but again, it could very easily dive into a full-fledged kind of game. But to me, it's a stepping stone
Does the
to.
term rabbit hole mean anything to you?
Yeah, yeah. I always know exactly what a rabbit hole looks like from the bottom of it, but never from the top.
Yeah,
Um,
I get
and
you.
yeah, and so that's famous last words. But we'll get there. So yeah, I want to do that kind of pre-dreadnought era, and then I want to launch back into World War One, because I think there's some great stories in World War One that people don't. Um, they don't know about, that usually gets eclipsed by big battles like Jutland. There's a lot of cool cruiser warfare. Is
Oh
some really
yeah,
cool and interesting stories in there. The auxiliary cruisers, the all the stuff that's happening in the far
you have
seas.
to do the Sea Adler. I think we talked about that
Yeah, yeah,
account
exactly.
in the
It's
Sea Adler. It was a
yeah,
three-masted sailing ship, man. If shipping wasn't $1 million, they'd send you my. It's a good book. It's
yeah,
uh, it's such an interesting period. Just speaking about some of these side projects, the game definitely works for that. I'd say mid-century period. I mean, you can even do the Danish German. There's a lot out there that you can do. Battle of Lissa is one of them. I think, and once again, this is me guessing more than saying. I think up until Span Am, and I think it will work for Span Am. I think the rules and the mechanics of the game are sound. That you wouldn't have to change the game very much. I think for later on, maybe just looking at more effective weapons and things like that. But I think the mechanics work. As everybody that listens to this podcast knows, anything about the Great War, I'm a fan of.
yeah,
Um, I'm excited for this game. Well, it's out. So before we wrap up, and you guys know when we wrap, we still keep talking. We just do it behind your back. Where can I find this game? I know where I found it, but tell us about your website and how I can get a copy of this. If I'm listening.
yeah. So our main website is scarybiscuitsstudios.com, and you can find there's going to be links to all sorts of stuff on there. But if you go to Dawn of Iron, you'll be able to find, there's a button at the top that'll take you to kind of the landing page for it. And there's not only can you there's a link to then to go get you can go buy the rules at Wargame Vault currently. So there's a link there for that. But there's also a link there for what I'm calling the shipyard, which is the experimental stuff that I'm pulling together. So these are it's basically downloadable content, free, that you can get. Grab all of these ships that I've not tested yet, or have yet to be run through their maiden voyages, and so they what I'm and I think there's 53 ships on in that PDF at the moment, and 55 I think I added to last night, and it's just going to be I'm constantly going to be adding stuff and taking stuff off of there as it gets tested, and then once we're kind of happy with like this kind of the balance of the ships and stuff like that, then they'll get pulled out and put into their battle packs to to kind of link to the battle that they were involved in. So like we've got the Battle of Hampton Roads one, which comes in the bundle. So if you go to Wargame Vaults, you can get this bundle, which is the rule book, 24 pages. There's a starter kind of print and play pack that kind of sits with that. So that gives you all of your damage decks. So both damage decks, your orders cards, and some upgrade cards, but also I think 3 ships. I think there's the 3 main ones from Hampton Roads are in there,
Yep.
and like a template, and also some flat kind of proxies. If you want to just print those off and have a play of the game without any miniatures, you can put some 1/600 scale kind of top down, quick and dirty ships in there. But I've also teamed up with a really cool guy out in the Hampton Roads area, actually, who called East Coast Ironclads, and he does 3D printing, sculpting, and 3D sculpting for printing, and he's done all of the ships that I've got in that Hampton Roads pack. He's got on his site plus a ton more. He just keeps adding more, and I'm just like they're really good quality prints. So if you are looking for uh, 3D print models, have a look at his website. And he and I are trying to kind of coordinate our releases as we kind of work up the next trench of work.
And you
So
have a
those are
link for him
yes,
on your
yeah,
page.
yeah, that's right. And then we've got a so yeah, so the website's got the links to the rules. That bundle has basically everything you need. Oh, the third thing in that bundle is the Hampton Roads battle pack, and what that is like I think 6 pages of history. It's got some maps in it as well, and then two scenarios, one for each day, and then a third kind of like general mission. So if you're familiar with Flames of War, you kind of know what this format is. You got 2 very specific, like tailored scenarios that tell you exactly what ships to bring. And then the third one, which is a mission, that opens it up to bring whatever you want, fight this battle with whatever you want, kind of a format. And then 20 and all 20 ship cards that were there on both days are represented as ship cards in that pack as well. That's
Yeah,
kind of how I want.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's how I kind of want to bundle up battles moving forward. Is have a couple of historical scenarios, a mission, and a bunch of ships that are associated with it. Bundle that up, and then send that out. So yeah.
One of the things I was going to ask, because I downloaded it right, couldn't wait to see it. But I guess you added the other pack a little later on. So I was going to say, yo, what's up with all the ships that I know from being on your Facebook page that you were looking at? But I didn't want to ask that here, and I realized my mistake. So that's been rectified. But hey, guys, gals that are out there, check out this game. Um, I I thought this game was interesting from the moment. Look, I didn't do Ironclads. And like I said, I have 4 of them now, and now I have a place to go buy more. I think it's a good game. I think the rules work very slick, and they're intuitive, and it gives you a different feel. It brings like a face and a warmth to the ship genre that is really missing from a ton of other games. And I say check this game out. We're going to do a review on it. No Dice, No Glory. Hopefully, it'll be out a few days after you're listening to this. And Mike, thanks so much for coming back on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always a
Yeah,
pleasure.
sorry it's been a year, but
Lots has happened in that time.
it has. It doesn't feel like it feels like just yesterday,
Yep.
this whole last year and a half. But I know it's early in the morning for you, so
Not too bad.
it's also tomorrow there. So
Yeah. The
yeah,
future looks nice. The future looks good, guys. A
which
little
is
bit
good, which is
overcast, but it's all
awesome.
right.
Yeah, it's just like it is here. But we're gonna have Jan again as more battle packs come out. And once again, we're gonna give you a big thank you and turn it back to Sean in the studio.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory, and keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.